Hi, all. This is Andrea Change. Hopefully, you can see my face. I am the executive director for the Guild Literary Complex, and I want to thank you for coming to this special event. Um, I had the pleasure. Rich Gibson is a member of our board and a very prolific writer. And with his recent book, I thought I would treat ourselves to a reading of his work. And so when I asked, he said, "Well, do you mind if I invite a couple people?" And I said, "Sure," expecting that he might have a favorite student or somebody that he wanted to invite. And he said Ed Roberson and Angela Jackson. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know if I can get those people. I was like, Angela just became the Illinois Poet Laureate. She's big time now. And having sent out those emails, they responded promptly with a very prominent yes. So we are in for a special treat. So in addition to hearing work from Gib- Gibbons this evening, you'll also hear from Ed Roberson as well as Miss Angela Jackson, the newest Illinois Poet Laureate. Just let me tell you a little bit about the Guild Complex before I introduce our poets this evening. The Guild Literary Complex is a performing literary arts organization. We've been around since 1989, started on Lincoln Avenue off Fullerton in a little independent bookstore called Guild Books. And from there, we have presented writers and poets from all over, from Adrienne Rich to Reg Gibbons to Richard Blanco to Patricia Smith, um, Joy Harjo, and the like. And in this latest iteration during the pandemic, we made the switch to have our events virtually. This is hopefully one of the last virtual events we'll be doing for a while, hopefully, with some of the new restrictions being lifted, we'll be able to have live events again, and looking forward to seeing your faces there. Um, Let me tell you a little bit about our readers this evening, if for those of you who don't know. And before I do that, let me say thank you to our partner, Seminary Co-op. They're our booksellers for tonight's event. In the chat, you'll see coming up links to all of the books, or links to the books, latest books. So Renditions by Reg Gibbons, Ask What Has Changed by Ed Roberson, and the most recent book by Angela Jackson, A Surprised Queenhood in the New Black Sun, about the life and legacy of Gwendolyn Brooks. But let me tell you a little bit about our poets this evening. Born and raised in Houston, Reg Gibbons earned his BA in Spanish and Portuguese from Princeton University, and both his MA in English and creative writing and his PhD in comparative literature from Stanford. I know that's going way back for you, Reg. Gibbons is the author of more than a half dozen collections of poetry, including Sparrow, New and Selected Poems, winner of the Balconies Poetry Prize, Creatures of a Day, 2008, and finalist for the National Book Award and Last Lake from 2016. Gibbons honors a poetic heritage spanning cultures and centuries in his thoughtful 11th collection, Renditions. Each poem is a rendition of another poet's work, which allows Gibbons to celebrate the relationship between translation, creation, and artistic appropriation. This book, Renditions, is full of deep respect for poets and the languages and cultures from which it borrows, emphasizing the shared connections and poetic tradition, even as it reimagines that tradition. That's from Publishers Weekly. Ed Roberson is an award winning author of many books of poetry, including the newly released Ask What Has Changed from Wesleyan Press in 2021, and another collection, somebody's been busy, forthcoming MPH and Other Road Poems from Verge Books that'll come out later this year. I think you mentioned that it might be out by the end of the summer. And then Angela Jackson is an award winning poet, novelist, and playwright with a forthcoming project due later in 2021. She's author of the significant biography, A Surprised Queenhood, that I mentioned before, about the life and legacy of Gwendolyn Brooks. And most recently, as I mentioned, has become the fifth Illinois Poet Laureate in 2020. Welcome, all of our poets this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start just letting you know that we're going to have each poet read for a short amount of time, and then we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A session. If you'd like, you can post your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. and then we'll have another round from each of the poets, and then we'll end with a bit of Q&A from them as well. Again, we ask that you make sure you stay muted, and if your questions aren't answered right away, we'll forward them as we can to the poets. But let's start with Reg Gibbons. Thank you, Reg.
Thank you. So this is my first 10 minutes. We each start with 10 and later we'll be back for 10. All these poems are from renditions. The first one is based on 2 or 3 lines by the Russian poet Marina Tsvetaeva. Swear by the cold beards of frosted stones, by stoic, steadfast winter pines, by the crystal frosted window where my lonely candle peers out. Swear when summer comes, I won't let even one skiff pass by on my river without my inviting it, stop, moor here. I won't let one singer stand at my listening door without my saying, come in, let us hear you. This is based on a poem by Cesar Vallejo. I took his poem and I changed most of the examples. You'll see what I mean by examples. It's called in Spanish, un hombre pasa con un pan, un hombre pasa con un pan. A man goes by with a loaf of bread on his shoulder. A guy goes by with a long loaf of bread on his human shoulder. And after that, I'm going to write about my doppelganger. In the alley, I see a girl looking for meat scraps and orange rinds. Is now when I'm supposed to write about the infinite? Another guy sitting on the curb scratches himself, nabs a louse in his armpit, smashes it, and we're going to chat about psychoanalysis? A homeless woman's sidewalk sleeping. Her foot's behind her back. And I'm going to go meet a friend so we can talk about Picasso. Some other guy swinging a stick at my bones has invaded my body. So then later at the doctor's, I'm going to talk about investments. This crippled dude goes wobbling by with a big kid, arm in arm. And after that, what? I'm going to read the art reviews. Someone is shuddering in the dark, coughing, spitting blood. When exactly would it be appropriate to theorize the inner self? A roofer falls, he dies, and from now on he goes without lunch. So now I'm going to invent some flashy new poetic effects. This diamonds bought and sold guy, he uses rigged scale weights. So make sure everybody at the opera sees you're weeping. Too near my building, this skinny guy deals heroin laced with fentanyl. Is this really the time to take alien sperm and astral travel seriously? The old couple at a funeral, crying as they walk holding hands. What is the protocol when you're voted into the academy? Sitting at the kitchen table, somebody's lovingly cleaning his handgun. What exactly is the good of talking about where we go after we die? A girl's run over by a local Nazi aiming his station wagon at her. And we have to hear about very nice people on both sides and not scream. A neighborhood granny goes by counting something on her fingers. And the biggies are saying, we must make sure the banks are okay. This one's also from Cesar Vallejo, Peruvian poet. And this is from his first book, second book, Back to the Village, a book from the 30s. It's dark when we arrive at the doorway where I spoke my long ago goodbye as the rooster was singing one of his epics. The door is locked. I call out, and there's no answer. The stone bench beside the door where Mama brought my big brother into this bright world so he would saddle backs for me. But I would later ride them bare, rambling through narrow streets and out beyond, village boy that I was. This very bench of stone is where I left my hard childhood to yellow in the sun. And this doorway framed by grief, God in his peace, somewhere else, far from this place. My horse, a mere beast, snorts. He too is calling to them. He's scented something. He clops his hooves on the cobblestones. He snorts, but he's not sure. He swivels his pricked ears. Papa must still be up, praying. Maybe even now he's still fretting. Something's made this boy late. My simple-hearted sisters incessantly whispering their busy little fantasies to each other, getting ready for a holy day that's not coming. And almost everything has been prepared. I hope and wait. My heart's an egg that almost, but something's blocking it. Something's in the way. That big family we forsook not so long ago. This night, nobody's still awake. Nobody's put even one candle on the altar so that we'd come back, my soul and I. I call out again, and nothing. I and my soul both hush. We begin to weep. The animal snorts, tosses his head, whinnies. But for all eternity, they're all asleep. Yet this is so much for the best that at last my tired horse standing beside me shakes his head, softly jiggling his bridle and the reins. But he falls asleep. Then he wakes. He bows his head low this night. He falls asleep again. And every time he wakes, he nods to me and he says, "It's all right. Everything's all right." Spell. This is after a poem by Bertolt Brecht. But this charm's green in the red world, low leaf that opens anyway among dry pebbles by a hard road. In the chained world, this charm is free. A private charm against goodbyes when you and I release each other. The farewell kiss, those lost child cries we swallow, this turning to a feather. I kiss your mouth. That's what I seek. This charm's a statement and reply and a seed, a wedge, a way to take what's good into our work today. This kiss is given at the border of night. Leaf that is ours, love that is green. Give us all more life, more blue note soul hours and days together again. Triage. It's from some lines by Boris Pasternak, the Russian poet. Along my hospitable hall, I hear tongues speaking in people. A kind and suffering, jumbled and scared, multilingual choral improvisation. From my bed, I hear the patients and healers conversing in disheveled rooms, up crowded corridors of more beds, following diagonals of waiting, resignation, not knowing, perhaps recovery. In the whole inmost ward of myself, the beds are occupied by slow-moving remembrances, like time-lapse flower novels. At night, now, outside the closed windows within me, and outside the clinic, I see tiny stars glittering at the bare twig tips of dark, cold, sleeping winter lindens, maples, each twinkling branch end a midnight candelabrum of the cosmos. Lips, hands, eyes. This is from a couple of lines from Marina Tsvetaeva. Although I actually got the idea for this poem without knowing that I had gotten it 20 years ago, probably from Angela Jackson. But she won't remember that. Lips that need no brand names. That's what I got from her in a roundabout way. Lips that need no brand names. Hands that dream the score of a gigue or await an escape into fugues. Eyes that do not close when they see hungry, displaced children, or unpleasant paupers, or beat up, out of tune pianos, or books that are searching a dim house for a lit lamp. Thank you.
Thank you, Reg. And now, Mr. Ed Roberson.
Thank you. Um, I'd like to read the poems from Ask What Has Changed. The title poem, Ask What Has Changed. Even staring out the window is changed. Private peak above it all brought down. Erosion of the poise between the viewable and the mused unseen. Dissolution, so nearly changeless as not to appear, is shifting the sands inside from what we watch. No more the steady stage the self-dramatic days play out on outside. The silent portent now allowed alert to things changing, the light of darkness. Not the normal individual mortality, but as if the epical heartbeat of larger elements, the seas, the air, had mutated, become chimera, grown winged, and routed ancestral time. Even staring out the window, the timeless is gone. We see coming in the daily migration of the local geese to the lake at evening, the cities pull up and move in unlike consternation towards and away from the water that has been so calming to gaze out on, to live by, easy to not live according to. And now that seas are adding themselves into the land, horizons look ominously larger. The arrivant out of them faster and clearer. Now you see the view is turned on us to frame. Human agency become transparent. The street knows it's changed. The street knows it's changed its direction. Once it was here, now it's the way to someplace else. Benches had been waiting to catch the little talk to get off and gathered at that corner. Now they're standing timed for as little the mobile app schedules tolerates safety limiting arrival. to one with any anticipatory glance down the road, except for what's late, as little weather to wait with as neighbor, known by name, the temperatures, all strangers to this time of year here, now is known to be looking elsewhere. Speculation. This poem is modeled on William Blake's Tiger, with Reds and a couple, Harnisha and Rachel Webster. We were part of a reading that accompanied the Block Museum's exhibit of William Blake's drawings. And this is in response to the poem Tiger. But this one's called Speculation. What comes after the ocean where it is? What will move in? What kind of neighborhood will it bring? What is that familiar horizon packing up, selling off, or getting rid of we don't see on the curve? What can it not pull out and have to leave in place in the sky? What if nothing moves in after the ocean? What will that absentee prophets, crackheads look like? What will they do to get it? What will there be to be got? If, oh no, what will there be to beget? Who can hold on to lifeless property? And how be that rich for millennia? Where will the arts who gentrifiers come from? And who can pay these prices? Fallen on the statue's lap. A white news page of snow fallen open on the statue's lap waits reading, while my edition bakes glacier and volcano all in one flow. Unlike old news, neither really wanted what we already knew, nor too new, a range we're used to. Now we've got this new big news, big as all history. But rivers flow and mountains rise, melted ice or cindered stone read as what they weren't supposed to mean, and almost nothing can change everything to writing on water, life on fire, Pompeian cast figures, reading, air. Alley. Here we call them way. Cart and horse scaled streets. Some US cities have alleys coughed enough the way the British might say muse. Doors silent the size to walk through for delivery, not to interrogate your journey, not big mouthing in stasis the importance of their place, ready to say not your destination, but here, actually someone's home in the alley. The neighborhood is changing. People are moving in as out faster than we can see who is going to be here, who the violence will leave unclear, who unafraid. A street scale without moving, I could talk across a line of words as easily as walk to hand you some of the fresh ripe tomatoes I'd hose clean because I know you're going to bite right there into one your way to let me know you think I know how to live across the street, cross away to, as in dance say, step come to, agree, destination in peace, the route differing for finishing together in one note. The flourish of that last corner's twirled collision that has no one thrown off the word for his land. These places have a quiet, unprotected reputation, so cheap, a way to run out. The city cleaning out his alley, out of his way of doing, run, out of others' way who don't know the way, do things like run them out, a street, the scale of what is happening instead of others want, a street, scale to let help to what's here get through, get away. Moon jar, the century is unclear. Part of the pearlescent surface is gone from the glass back to sand, a label of time. That through the losses narrowing, this one from the Phoenician through the hour, glass is opening to hear, names this crust. Only in number, grains of year, not the shift, not the heat, the fires, the person of each who held it through, held the jar against its slate. Archaeological glass breaks itself down from the outer layers inward into. Feel the sandstorm of the glass dissolution on the surface, the gritty cloud rise out of the smooth and transparent fade in and out of its crust, a moon through the clouds. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed Roberson. And now, Miss Angela Jackson.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure and an honor to read with Reginald Gibbons and Ed Roberson. I'm especially glad to celebrate Reg tonight because he's the kind of person who's always pushing someone else forward, who's always celebrating others. So I'm glad he's being celebrated. And I'm going to start with a poem that he likes, My Father's Prayers.
Oh, yes.
Every morning, my father prayed on his knees at the side of his marriage bed. He bowed his head and poured his prayers into two loose fists over his mouth. We watched in wonder as the one who could give a whipping and scald us with his tongue turned into a penitent child, obedient and intense petitioner. We lurked around his doorway like cowardly debtors, observing his rich rite of passage into the working day or weekend that worked also, except for Sunday when he got up, dressed in his best, put on his hat, and went calling on relatives, our Aunt Tuppy, who had a piano. He could make it talk, the keys jangling an entrance to paradise. Blue fire in his fingers, he threw his head back and let his hands go with his relaxed, ecstatic body. And with each sound, he threw away or burned away everything that hurt a man or brought him to his knees.
Mm.
This is a poem I don't think I've ever read before, and it is the title poem for my book of poetry that's coming out in January, and it is dedicated to Cornelia Spellman and her husband, Reginald Gibbons, More Than Meat and Raiment. Perhaps dream figures of fire and wind, spirit being gathered up in human being momentarily, more than flesh and flashy garments, more than supper and skin of many colors, more than meat and raiment. Age, gender, race, hue, aristoi, data to discard, after, when, and why, and whys, identity on earth, momentous momentarily. Who you are is who you are, a blaze inside, a bloom, arisen, all the ages you have ever been. Remember all the stories you were ever told, all the stories you ever told, all the songs you ever heard sung, all the songs you could barely hum, all of these winding around inside you like a choir of remembrance, blood of heritage, blood of spirit, promise and delay, clamoring, stammering child, weeping woman, howling, crying man, talking baby, blood of heritage, blood of spirit, injuries, slights, neglects, abandonments, assaults, bruises, all the hurts you have endured, survived, and did not, but took inside. These are you, as much as the fire leaping up and out, and the wind spinning round, delight and comfort, succor and hilarity, a trembling soul, peace, God, lamp, heart pumping red, blooded, blue blooded, true blood, round, bone of bones, bone of honor, bone of strength, backbone connected to the wise, head bone connected through the body, bones to bones, all connected more than themselves. All the feelings felt recur, course through thoroughfares of thought, riding and gently twinkling like little lights strung around through, until the mind breaks with love or words of need. Desire is a firework opening up this moment into a thousand thousands, and more than that or this, more than words or images, and invisible, indelible, indivisible, infinite, beyond age, the numeral or gender, the sex or wish or race, the wise or myth or class, the money or no money, or manners or hue, the grades of color or aristoi, the steps above, below, more than concept or conceit, food and clothing, elusive as freedom, need, and justice, belief or disbelief, the presence of awe and awesome, awful and discreet, replete and contiguous, night and noon at once, and more than anything we can name now or then or once, more than meat and raiment, far, far more than, and then there will be more for you.
Thank you, Angela. Thanks so much. Thank you all so far. I'm thoroughly enjoying this and this little fan fest that you three have going here. Um, I was gonna say that I was trying to do some research and look up some of your work, and I asked specifically for Ed and Angela to read from this one particular book. But as a kid going to church, I was one of those kids where I was not the person who loved fire and brimstone preachers. all that jumping up and down and yelling and screaming, that never got to me. But any preacher that came with a good story that was solid and built on intellect, while everybody else was going to sleep in church, I was the one paying attention. And what I found is that as I was reading through everybody's work, is that that's what drew me into.
Okay.
That's what would draw me into your work. And you all are these sort of pieces have sort of this sort of intellectual quality that has this great appeal, at least for me, but it's still really, really accessible. So, it's interesting to sort of, even though you all have these distinct styles, it's all very sort of I don't know, something that's readily accessible. But I wanted to ask Reg. I was looking through Last Lake, and I saw a couple pieces in there, and so I was curious if some of the rendition poems didn't sort of begin or get I want to say inspired by some of the pieces you did from the book Last Lake. I need to unmute.
Red shit on mute.
Right. Okay, what I was saying was, in fact, in Renditions, there are a number of poems that I first published as translations, and without sort of riffing on them or just taking pieces and going with that into something more. So some of the poems did appear in earlier books in different versions. I think there are two that are still pretty much in the same version they were originally in Renditions. But yeah, I keep drawing on what I've already done in order to find my way to what I am trying to do.
Because there's one I want to say Dark Honey. That one that I really liked. And it was funny because when I read a book of poetry, I just open the book, and I feel like the poem that wants to be read first is the poem that the book will open to. So I started reading Dark Honey from the middle, and then I had to turn the page and start all over again. So it was, but yeah. So I was, and I remember when I was going back, I started looking at that, and so that was what was interesting to me. And I like the fact that Renditions doesn't. I mean, there's some poems in there. I think one of them is by Whitman, but it's not sort of the usual fare. I think that for the average person who reads poetry, these are sort of a little further back in the time machine. I like that fact, and also that some of them are from Spanish and Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
So was that intentional that you wanted the reader to sort of maybe have do a little homework with these pieces? Not that you're a teacher, but
I'm not trying to make anybody go back and study anything. Dark Honey that really were those were the first renditions I had ever done, but I didn't understand that I could think of them in the way I came to think of them later. So a few of those appear also in Renditions after having been in Last Lake. Those are just based on a few lines or phrases, all of them from another Russian poet, Osip Mandelstam. The image making and the metaphors in the Russian poets of the early 20th century is just amazing. And fortunately, I have a friend who's Russian and a poet, and so I've learned a lot about them from him.
So I wanted to ask Ed a question because, again, as I was doing some research, I sort of drew on this one particular poem that I saw, and I'm a big fan of Chicago architecture. So right away I was intrigued by it. It's called I can hardly say this word, Architectonus, and it was 20 for the Chicago Architecture Center. These each little sonnets, but they were so, I don't understand. There was these wonderful little trinkets like jewels about each of these little buildings in Chicago, and I found myself sort of getting the feeling, this vibe from each of these buildings. So that you were trying to, and I don't know if that was your intent to impart these things on in those pieces, but I just fell in love with it. It was just so much heart and so in these little bitty pieces and sort of capturing those things. And I'm curious at what was the origin of that particular piece, and how'd you come about doing that? And I know you're a fan of architecture, I should ask as well.
Yeah, there were a couple of architecture courses that I took in college that I liked architecture, and I had a good friend that was a climbing partner, Larry Wolf, who was an architect, and so he let me go in his office. So I really have a love for architecture. But and when I moved to Chicago, I ended up living in the building that I did my thesis in the architecture class. I did my thesis on Lake Meadows, and I was driving down King Drive, and I happened to look over, and there it was. So, and I was looking for an apartment, so I was moving to Chicago. So my love of Chicago architecture, it goes way back. And those poems they weren't meant to actually teach anybody anything about the architecture, but they were meant to say, oh, this is fun and this is what I do with it, kind of thing. That like for instance, the teacher made the remark about we wouldn't have skyscrapers if we didn't have elevators, Otis. So I have this funny little poem about in there
Otis. Yeah, about
about,
Otis.
and it's fun. Angela's online, so I can tell her. I turned the elevator into a spider
Oh.
because that poem Angela has about Angela, I can't remember which one, where the Greek goddess gets jealous and turns.
Praxia.
Yes, that poem that she wrote. I love that poem. you know. So I turned the elevator. In the second poem, I did the Otis poem, and then in the second poem about the elevator, I turned it into your spider, where she just takes over. She not only does up and down, but she does, because Otis does the moving walkway.
Right.
So she does not only up and down, she does side to side too. She got it, you know. So that's your spider. But it's just people poems about architecture. That's all.
Well, it was interesting to me because you cover like a different building. So like you cover the Mecca, you cover the Rookery, you cover the Hancock. So it was like all these different architectural styles. So I was all into it because I'm a little bit of an architect. So I appreciate that. And I caught the spider reference, but it was funny because usually the spider is a guy, from African folk tales. So
Not
when you made it a woman, I was like, that's a nice little twist. So
That's Angela.
how cute. So yeah, so and then Miss Angela, you want to tell us a little bit you were talking about this book that you've got coming out. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
It's just a collection. It's in three parts. One is the story of my family and the Great Migration. The second is a retelling of a house of folktale, poetically, and the third is poems that are contemporary. But mostly, I want to tell you something about my job as poet laureate because I need help. I need four uh, young ambassadors of poetry who are in their 20s and 30s who want to do short-term residencies in schools, community centers, rehab centers, nursing homes, prisons, wherever, 2 to 5 days. Each has a budget of 3,000, and I already have one ambassador, and I'm looking for more. If you want to send me your CV at Angela R. Jackson at AOL.com, I would appreciate it.
Okay, well, we'll put the word out that you're looking for some young ambassadors for your work. How long is the ambassadorship? Is it
We'll start training, rehearsing in like July, and the ambassadors will start in like August until June. August till June will be the and and each should do a couple for the 3,000, and
okay?
I
All
think
right.
it's cool.
That's
Yeah, it's
I will
kind of
put the
like
word out.
the old poets in the schools program, if you remember that, you know. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I'm sure somebody will be interested in that, and it's always nice that they get compensated. So we'll spread the word a little bit about that. But in the meantime, if you would like to do another round with us, you, Miss Jackson, and then Mr. Roberson, and then we'll have Reg close it out.
Okay. I'm going to read one poem because it's long. This is not the program I intended to do. Remember, you called me Aunt Andrea, and I was looking for poems. That never is mine.
I was like, she sounds like
That's
she's
a little bit.
scamming. I'm surprised the house ain't torn up.
Okay. For our people, an homage to Margaret Walker's For My People. For our people everywhere singing their gospels and their rap, their blues, R&B and their jazz, their soul and their neo soul, all great Black music, scuffling, scrimping, struggling to get by. For our people working as wage slaves in collars blue, white, and pink, doing the best they can with what they have, hoping it will not be taken away with a pink slip, a sudden slip from a parapet on cement into disability or welfare or not, hustling to keep from being crushed on the unemployment line. For our people, for the way of years sipping summer from a tall glass of ice water, buttermilk and cornbread out of a mayonnaise jar, years testing watermelon, cutting a plug of sweetness, knocking on the round or oblong to listen to the taste, for the excellence of young boys running like they stole something, but only owning themselves and the strength in their legs, and girls who could keep up before breath held them back. For our people and red Kool-Aid days, for smothered chicken and our cries smothered in a world that did not adore us, but ignored us, or worse, and ran us back on the other side of the viaduct where we belong, not in the wild world we could conquer or excel in, given the gates opening and tools for redress. For our people everywhere, growing gardens on vacant lots, training roses and black-eyed Susans and perennials in front yards, raking leaves and shoveling snow, scooping dew and picking up litter, washing and ironing out the wrinkles of everyday existence. For our people, running with nowhere to go, watching television and movies looking for ourselves, searching books and the nooks and crannies of history for a glimpse of what was waylaid and what is to be, in barbershops and beauty parlors and ice cream parlors and the stone faces of funeral parlors, picking up children from school, from daycare, taking them to football, soccer, baseball, tennis, basketball, volleyball, having a ball at family reunions on Saturday nights. For our people who came in chains, tortured over turbulent waves, broken-hearted and broken tongue and broken magic, broken bloodlines, strangled and whipped, distraught and driven to the edge of the mind and beyond. For our people leaping to the sea, feeding sharks and myths and cautionary tales, surviving the journey to reach auction blocks and prurient pedestals for deposed queens and chieftains, villagers humiliated, abused, raped, and riddled with misery into exquisite survivals, changing vocabulary and clothes, changing into sleek panthers and superheroes, making the world safe for demonstrations of protest and affection, all beauty and love, scapegoated, pilloried, denied the excellence we bring. For our people grasping for gadgets and genuflecting to electric celebrity, worshiping trinkets and noisome symbols that blink and itch the eyes, gaming and gambling and laughing to keep from crying and crying, laughing, cracking up and falling out, drinking suicide and spilling milk and blood, gunned down under lampposts, in playgrounds, bloodied in drive-bys, in alleys, in living rooms, in bed, sleeping. For our people bludgeoned by police and each other, killed by presumptuous watchers, taxed for black and driving while black, shot in the back, falsely convicted, sentenced to dwell alone and want to be redeemed, incarcerated in stone, trapped in department stores, harassed, stalked in malls, and all the places people spend and sell. Our people selling loose squares, oil, socks, and peanuts on the corners of our desperate longing for hair, for nails, for body graffiti. For our people in the casinos, scheming in pennies from heaven with one-armed pirates, dreaming in die and cards and dealers, dreaming numbers and playing them till they hit. For our people drowning in spirits, burning throats and pockets, losing it all, spoiling livers, lungs, and kidneys, hearts with too much, each of us addicted to drugs of fashion, to ancient hurt, choosing crabs in a barrel or lifting as we climb, each one, teach one. For our people who do not belong to me, but to all of us, for we belong to each other, must hold each other in heart and mind. For our people in the citadels of learning and the one-room schoolhouse, in the storefronts of funeral parlor fans and the cathedrals of painted windows and arched ceilings that lend toward sky. For our people in the baptismal pool, in white robes on the edge of the river, for our people chanting and praying and hoping for a sweeter brew to sip and savor. Let a new earth arise, let justice pour like trembling rain, and mercy prevail as plentiful fields. Let our strength be matched by vulnerable honesty of heart. May resilience be our guide, for we will stumble and then will rise, more able having fallen, more beautiful having met each other along the way as we lifted each other up. Hero people who go out of their way for love and stay on the way of goodness. Let our people be the people who remember and believe that love is all our portions, all our currencies, and all our one. Each of us injured or exalted, betrayer or betrayed, muted and declamatory, all one. Each of us, all of us, each a private star beloved in the universe, each of us creature of burdens and singing angel merged as one, alive and moving upward, holding on and lifting this earth, our house, precious and precarious, and God be our witness between this gravity and this grace. Hold tight and fly.
I know, right? You was bringing the fire, Miss Jackson.
I hardly ever breathe that.
I know that's a long breath. Okay, so thank you, Miss Jackson, and now Mr. Ed Roberson again.
Thank you, Andrew, for that poem. I love that poem. Okay, I'd like to read from my section um, one poem from the new manuscript coming up from NPH. Um, NPH is a manuscript from a cross-country motorcycle trip that I took from Pittsburgh to San Francisco and back in 1970. Um, two more motorcycles, three people. Um, Dick Vandal, Andrew Welsh, myself, BMWs, 600s, two white guys and skinny black kid. A year after Easy Rider came out, we're going to go country on my crossing. We made it. But the poem I want to read is titled For Andy from MPH, or For MPH from Andy. Always that list once back of things no one brings up, that no one understands if happened. Then a train did cross out of nowhere on a desert road without crossing signals in the middle of the night. And its eyeless cars tip and pour glowing slag into the ground down all the way back to Pittsburgh through the middle of the country that night. And Guede did step from that fire Brooklyn West Indian Day parade, naked, top hat and tails, high heels, and meet me at the Fillmore San Francisco West that night with pills. I was asked to read the poem from Poetry and Protest, and the poem is not brought up like the things from the motorcycle trip. A lot of things are not brought up. This poem was written after 9/11, September 11, 2000. And I was in a program with Lucille Clifton about a month after that. And people were really still traumatized. And Lucille made this statement that this hasn't happened before. This is not something new. And she said that we needed to think about what had happened more deeply. And we both had the same kind of idea. And this is a poem that I had written at that time. What isn't brought up, or what had not been brought up, or not brought up, is the title of the poem. Just as a matter of scope, it felt like that. Was the numbers of people we wanted justice brought down upon, that many gone along, keeping silent, kept in office for, just the sweep of the complicit terror against us. The lynchings, each of the thousands of times it happened, the whole white town come down to a smoky picnic, each blackened by the family there is in soot, must have felt that magnitude against them, stacked high, come down out of the hills, must have felt that register, force, the running, or the blank walk away up Broadway or Greenwich, coated in white, no longer simple ash, ghosts like a range of that, not brought up. I want to read a couple of new poems. This one is called Measure. As the crow flies is only its eye's estimated distance. The actual journey is up and down all over the place. Watch a gull thrown by a gust off its flight path, maneuver the gully of falling cat to reorient back to the ground flow and hang, hold still along the long slide ride up to the next flat, directing it toward control. About the buses falling 1,000 feet over the Andean twists. Across that valley, that cloud valley, there is about how long the air cut off by kneeling American racists on people's necks, there is the crow's raucous silence. Opinion. We need something purer than this payback sense as basis for our sense of justice. We need our responsibility to each other, for each other, to experience balance, not economy, not measuring out something, but something within, to experience what to do, our duty, to keep the whole of it upright, that is justice, which is not to be excused by love, that is mercy. But that mercy can exist before commission, and justice must determine that act of balance. With human gods, with original sin, Christianities, and like, the game is rigged in favor of the pardoner, not the participants, and institutes in favor of how or who can instate its dear sentence of love, of mercy, of the justice, of love, of life to go on instead of the favor we owe each other to live life itself. If we knew some justice in that, we would then do so that much more upright. And the cost, not expensive trial and campaign, but on the sword's edge, a measureless equipoise. Hard not. The damage we have to do to ourselves to carve and seize our humanity out of what this racist system had made us, damage upon damage, further distortion warped from the first mutilation in order to pervert back into life the misinterpretation right, the twist in straightening, not in, without relief. Each lived aberration added also in damage upon to get done what we basically are to become, what it takes to become ourselves, from what we became to them, by them, they unchanged, we free, released but loaded, with how incomplete. Reboot sonnet. You've noticed those videos are never of us giving the bigness of ourselves to each other with any respect or intimacy. It's always a dick down, violent takeover of, boss, command, never let's do this shit together jam. Any recognizable blood of dance we am reputed for booting up this music for. The music sells, but this is what we get for it. This porn, except for the white audience fantasy, maybe. For the big black dick, maybe, to accept. But something humongously precious fits the slot black gets through to get to it really is. Think about it. The scene form watches the seer's eyes open. Let me open by asking, is this scene active or passive? Object or agent is watching. A source powerful enough to illuminate is what this is looking at. Or is the scene form watching for the seer's eyes to open? In which case, don't shoot until you see the whites. Makes no sense, or at best is short-sighted regarding their eyes. No, it is best to think what I'm speaking of is mind. That set of eyes open upon things which see through and into, though blacks can actually see the whites of people's eyes. It isn't usually through their eyes either. Eyes notwithstanding, nonetheless, there must be admitted the occurrence of illumination, of knowing by being seen. That is astonishing enough, but how nothing is left out is devastating. Both object and seer were made without apparent material dismantling, notwithstanding the lynchings, the burnings, raids, and legal justifications made to do that sort of thing. Nothing is different. Everything is as it always was and should be, seer, object, seen, until what the seeing has done, suddenly brought about, reflects back as beyond the seer's world, the revealed arrangement of the true contempt against which any mark makes, if anything, inscrutably less an insult than merely a local pitch. Fencing question. That fence, which the winds graffiti blue weathers the sky down to its gray before dark. When the far wall of that gated distance then startles into view, all the brilliant locks shining, how closed, the sparkling pins of whether anything we know fits hang over unreleased space. Is this why the woolly clouds flock back and arrive each morning? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberson. Appreciate that. And we'll round it out with our author of the night, Reg Gibbons.
Thank you. Angela and Ed, those poems you just read are very moving, very powerful. I thought I'd end with some little fragments, tiny fragments that I brought into English, not absolutely scrupulously word for word, from among the 100 or something lost plays of Sophocles. These are just little scraps that people quoted here and there, and so they've survived. And there are many of them, but this group made me feel so admiring of the intelligent way Sophocles noticed everything. I call this pieces of ancient life. They're tiny little things. They're short as haikus, some of them. He who makes the journey to one in power is his slave, even if when he set out, he was free. Battle loves to hunt men down. A pity the flute for the dance has stopped. His joy made him float like wind-blown thistledown. Early this morning, before the farm slaves were up, I was carrying in for the young goats fresh, tender branches I'd broken off for them, and I saw an army marching in from where the cape reaches furthest into the sea. Head down, they hang like songbirds in the net. A scorpion stands watch among the rocks. How heavy on everything are the thick cloaking cobwebs. A man is only breath and shadow. Down the steep hills, a grazing antlered deer would come slowly, lifting its nose and the fine points of its wide rack, easing itself down unnoticed. As in the pale top leaves of a tall aspen, even if in nothing else, high up this morning, the air moves a little, flutters one feather. In the smoke from the bright altar flames in their streets float sweet foreign scents of myrrh. They burn drop by drop. Many are the things I envy in your life, most of all that you have never been to any foreign land. Oh, what happiness could you have that is greater than this, after reaching land to lie down under the eaves and hear in your sleeping thoughts, not the ocean, but steady small rain. She went rushing along in a bright colored coat. And then this one, this is a translation really, from a poem of Osip Mandelstam written in 1913. Yes, bread that's poisoned and not even one sip of air. How hard it is for the wound of life to be cured. Joseph himself, sold to Egypt as a slave, could not have been more heavily grieved. Then under the sky swarm of stars, Bedouins come. They quiet their horses. Then in turn, with eyes closed, each invents some chanted fragment of their day of epic anything that only brought them boredom. For among such writers, little's needed to inspire. In the dunes, one man lost a quiver of arrows. Others traded some geldings for a mare. Events are only a mist that thins and disappears. But if such songs are sung out to the end with all the heart, with all the breath in the lungs, almost everything vanishes. And what remains is the desert vastness, the stars, the one who sings. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's a great poem. Yeah.
Thank you, Reg, for that. Thank you
you.
so much. This is I love that you're able to sort of reinvent yourself with poetry. I'm sure you probably have you seen this sort of evolution with your poems? Do you like that you can do something more simplistic, or or these translations?
Someone asked in the chat, so how do I make a rendition? Where does that come from? What's the process? The process is just that I like to read poems, especially if they're in other languages, because I see what you can do in other languages. And if I don't speak the language, then I read the Russian poet Marina Tsvetaeva, I read a lot of her poems in French translation. I can read that. But I just read through and something grabs me, something gets, something really opens something up suddenly, just a little thing. And then I take that, and that's what I try to chase down. That's what I try to open up and find, because I know that there was something in the poem I just read that apparently went right into me. There was something, some availability in me that was waiting, that was able to get hold of that. And
So would you say that it's I don't use the term ekphrastic in that sense, that there's something that in that poem that triggers the other poem, or is it?
It's not ekphrastic because I never do it with visual objects. I have to hear somebody else's language, and that often, well, not as often as I'd like, but sometimes that opens up something in me. I get a phrase of my own in response. It just comes into my head, and I think, okay, let me see what's here. Let me see if I can figure this out by just trying to open a channel, trying to open, to create uh, an emotional and thought place that's ready to do something, where something's ready to be felt or thought because of this other thing I just read.
So when you did the renditions, I'm curious now, did you actively seek out things or translations or poems that you wanted to do or work with, or was it just a process of just becoming inspired and you just sort of
I'm
kept
reading
going?
poetry all the time, so either written in English or written in a few languages I can make out, or in translation. And then if it's in translation, if it's a language I can do something with a dictionary, then I'll go back to the original. I'm just always listening. You have to listen. It's like music in a way. If you're a musician and you're listening to other people play, and you have enough ability of your own, you're going to hear things that you want to do. Oh, that thing that he just did that went by on that saxophone. Oh, I got to see what that opens up for me. Just like that, I think.
That's a good way to put it. I'm just curious about the when you're talking about the process and such. And you said that you probably wouldn't do that again. Was it because it was so challenging, or was it just an exercise for you?
No, I don't like to repeat myself. I like to find something that I could do that I haven't done before.
Yeah, it was interesting when you mentioned, Ed, about the next book. I was going to ask, I had planned to ask rather you about your travels, because you're quite the traveler, and um, in terms of the types of experiences that you've had. And is this your first book about your travels, or have
Oh
you
no,
done some other?
oh no. I'm always let me see. I'm always bringing up the imagery of that comes from the travels, as it's brought back to my everyday life. I remember from when years ago when I made the first expedition to South America. One of the first poems I wrote was I just used I needed an image of surprise, and I was taking off my clothes and I put my pants down and took my belt off, and my belt slithered off off the bed. And fresh from South America, I jumped like crazy. I thought it was a snake out of the corner of my eye, So that the image of what all your life had been a belt, now because of the South American experience, the belt slithering off the chair or off the bed is a snake and makes you alert, means that that trip has alerted you to much larger life. Yeah. So I just use the imagery all the time. And the MPH manuscript, which was written like 40 years ago, was lost. And then when I was closing up my house to finalize, and I moved to Chicago, Patty, my friend, she found it up in the attic, and she just found the manuscript, and I don't know how it had gotten moved. It had been about 3 moves, and I thought I had lost it somehow. She found it, and I didn't look at it for a month. I was afraid to look at it, But then when I did look at it, I discovered that, yeah, that's me, and that's what I talk about, and that's the things that have always concerned me, and the poems that I wrote even after I lost the manuscript had road images in them. So when Peter O'Leary and Andrew wanted to put together the NPH manuscript, I added all the new poems to it. So it's all of the poems that have to do with the road in my work, have to do with the discovery, the journey. MPH is my life. It's that kind of thing.
You're like a Black Peter Fonda on this road trip, right?
It didn't end. It did not end.
That's funny.
It didn't end.
So, and you said NPH is going to be available later this summer?
Yeah.
Okay, so let us know when that comes out so we can talk a little bit more about that. And Ms. Jackson, you said that your book, and what was the title of the book that's forthcoming again, Ms. Jackson? Oh, you're on mute, babe.
More Than Meat and Raiment.
I love that title. More Than Meat and Raiment. And you said from the
Matthew 6. Yeah.
Well, nobody says raiment too often anymore, so.
Yeah.
But that's early next year, correct?
January, yes.
January. All right. So I'm looking forward to it. There'll be more to talk about.
Yeah, I'm really happy with it. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Well, for those of you who are listening, I just want to make sure that you know about Reg's book, Renditions, which is available through Seminary Co-op. We posted the link in the chat already, but we can post it again for you. At Roberson right now, Ask What Has Changed, also available through Seminary Co-op. And right now, the book that Angela Jackson has out right now, or the most recent book, A Surprise Queenhood, which is an awesome book biography about the legacy of Gwendolyn Brooks. And considering there were like 7 or 8 books about Gwendolyn Brooks that came out that year, Surprise Queenhood was the only biography. So that's, and it's a lot more in depth than I think the previous biography was. So it's definitely worth a read.
It was very useful to me though. I was able to talk about, he passed away in 82, George Kent did. So I was particularly fresh from 82 to 2000 when she passed away. So
Right.
yeah. Plus there was material that was available to me in her archives at the University of Illinois that he did not get to look at. Yeah.
It was funny. Earlier this year, we had a conversation with Nikki Giovanni, and she jokingly said that she was not a fan of Miss Brooks's cooking, and said that she was not the best cook. And then I was speaking to somebody at the Newberry who has her papers, and they have a recipe of hers that she used to, and she had it written down, and she said they said somebody made it for a office party, and they said it was interesting. So
It was good.
it was interesting. That's what they said.
Oh no, not interesting. That's
Right. So I was like, okay.
well, I never had a cooking. Okay then.
Yeah, Nikki was like, Miss Giovanni, she was like, I dreaded going to her house. She would invite me for lunch, and I dreaded it. And I was just like, okay. So now that's not to say that she was a bad cook. That's just one person's opinion. Miss Giovanni also told me how she makes her her greens. We talk about greens and ham hocks and all this other stuff. So that's another story. But anyway, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. Rich Gibbons, Ed Roberson, Angela Jackson, such a pleasure. For those of you who are not familiar, the Guild Literary Complex, again, is a performing literary arts organization. We try to do events like this all the time, giving you access to poets, poems, and literature in ways that you don't always have a way to get access to. If you wish to donate and pleased with what you saw tonight, certainly you can go to our website, guildcomplex.org, hit that donate button and make a donation. Again, all of the books from these authors are available through Seminary Co-op. Check out their website as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and you have a great rest of your evening. Good night.